Two of the longest running and most recognisable elders of the series, the leonine dragons Teostra and Lunastra, are the Emperor and Empress of Fire. They're also some of the most ornate elders seen, and one of the rare species to have sexual dimorphism too. So what can we infer from their physiology and snippets of behaviours seen in the series? One of the most prevalent features visible on both of them is their mane, and such a flamboyant structure can tell us much about an animal, especially when it's present in both sexes. So what are manes for? The World Book gives us 3 reasons, some of which partially overlap with manes seen in other species, and can be compared directly. The first reason being protection. Rather than soft fur, Teostra's mane can deflect hunters' blades, and is presumably wiry or bristly to the touch. Teostra tend to confront opponents with a head-on charge, and as such with its armour purpose, Teostra presumably protects itself reasonably well from the slashing tusks of other Teostra, which are probably their most frequent combatants. In this respect, the mane is almost rather like an external boar shield, which is a thick layer of cartilage-like tissue in male pigs, when they fight by ramming and slashing one another with their own tusks. In this vein, Teostra's tusks may well function in a similar way to warthogs and other suids, with the grinding action used to create the spark also making the tusks very sharp, as they repeatedly act as each other's whetstones, and are capable of leaving deep slash wounds on an unprotected opponent. Whilst the mane of a lion doesn't function well as armour outside of a tertiary role at most in that regard, especially as the mane can fall out and shorten after wounding, and lions often prefer to attack each other's hindquarters anyway, there is something of a parallel in a lion's mane in that it isn't just a static structure, and seemingly neither is Teostra's. Manes function as an honest billboard for the animal's condition. Age, food, wounding, testosterone levels, and area of upbringing can all affect length and colour, and the risen Teostra, those that survived Curio infection, appear to have bleached or at least paler manes. So this would indicate that, as hypothesized in universe, manes do play some role in selection and courtship, and this is where the similarities may lie. The darker a lion's mane, the better the specimen, with longer lifespans, pride residency, and better offspring survival. Presumably, if Teostra's mane functions as a similar billboard, and is paler after severe infection capable of killing elders, then mane colour becomes less vibrant in adverse conditions, and perhaps the most crimson manes are the most attractive. It is said that Teostra's mane serves as a symbol of his prowess, and is believed to be used in attracting partners. It's also possible with elders being elders that there are other colours the human eye can't see as well. But, with time and healing, such a mane could also be an extra attractive feature. Mane length and reproductive success in lions aren't correlated, and it's even suggested an overly long mane may suggest excessive caution. In a similar fashion, risen Teostra that do survive and recover, with an outer ring of pale mane or pale striations in it, could potentially be even more attractive in showing their power in overcoming something as lethal as the Curio, to then resume prime status. It's also said that Teostra in the New World have longer and fuller manes, but New World individuals are seemingly just Old World ones that have made the crossing. There's no gene separation between the two, so the extent of Teostra's mane length and fullness may well also vary with its condition too, becoming longer and fuller in the richness of the Elder's recess. But as said, Teostra isn't alone in being maned. Lunastra is too. Lunastra's mane is smaller than Teostra's, being more of a set of extensive mutton chops, but the body is more extensively furred too. It's unknown, but can be partially assumed, that even if not to the same extent, that Lunastra's mane may fulfill similar roles to Teostra's, and there may be some mutual mate choice occurring as well. This may stem from the very long lifespans of elder dragons, which may well get into the hundreds of years. This incredibly slow life history, with high survival rates and presumably long latency after mating, make for the modelled conditions of mutual mate choice in animals. If you're very long-lived and just about all life processes take time, then it's ideal to find someone reliable to undertake them with, so both partners are picky regarding who they get with. More time is spent on mating processes than searching for mates, and so mate quality becomes very important. Latency in this regard is viewed as anything that delays breeding again after the initial mating. If we assume all elder life history processes are fairly slow, then elders may have long gestation periods and long interbreeding periods too that would suit this hypothesis. But these factors aren't unique to Teostra and Lunastra. It seems all elders are long-lived animals with high survival rates, so why is so little similar in them? And it may be that Teostra and Lunastra are some of the more sedentary elders, as well as reasonably strong habitat fidelity to volcanoes and to a lesser extent deserts. As both sexes are seemingly thermophiles, Teostra also build themselves extensive nests, believed to be for reproduction as well. This may well imply that they spend a long time in one place, or at least by elder standards. Kushala, Velkana, Nergigante and Shagarumagala, among other elders, show more nomadic behaviours, and less habitat fidelity. If Teostra and Lunastra are relatively unique in settling down for long periods of time, then this may result in choosiness over who they do so with. The only other dragons seen to engage in similar behaviour are Nawa and Ibushi, which also engage in extensive nest clearing too. Nomadic animals can rely on uncertainty in parenthood to prevent infanticide, and so other elder dragons by comparison may have fleeting relationships, and yet little aggression to others of their own kind. They may either be a potential mate or carrying your children, at least if we assume sexual reproduction for elders outside of Nergigante and Shagarumagala. But for Teostra and Lunastra with their set bonds instead, other potential partners may not be worth undergoing the lengthy partnership period and post-mating latency too, and so are just viewed as another drain on resources that can't be tolerated. Aggressive male animals will sometimes kill what may seem like viable females, or ones that will be viable, for similar reasons. And so an unbonded Teostra or Lunastra may not just have to worry about competing with its own sex, as can be assumed, but risking hostility from the other rather than a mating chance as with other pair-bonded species like Rathian and Rathalos. Both genders may aggressively defend territory together, and respond to intruders with maximum aggression even if their own kind. It's believed Lunastra's immense aggression in the New World is also tied to reproduction as well, and they became much more vigilant and hostile in the mating period, which isn't uncommon in many species. As well as other Lunastra and Teostra, this hostility is also directed to other elders, and the coupling in the mating period gives them a key advantage over other species, allowing them to repel even Nergigante, who is one of the few threats to the pair individually, with Lunastra pretty willingly leading the charge. Lunastra in general are described as protective of their mates, and will go to great lengths to assist them. As well as just being rare among elders in that they're sexually dimorphic, Teostra and Lunastra also seem to be monogamous, or can be suggested to be so, and this may also partially stem from their more sedentary behaviours. Monogamy in many species is believed to stem from mate guarding and/or protection from infanticide, though the latter theory is less favoured now, and this may fit with other things suggested about the monogamous elders. Teostra goes to considerable effort to build the nest believed to be for reproductive purposes, and if elders just bred anywhere and quickly, it's questionable if such a structure would be needed. Similarly, we see this in Nawa and Ibushi too, who nuke an area from orbit to make it safe for their young to be raised in. So Teostra and Lunastra may have a prolonged courtship and mating period, during which Teostra is initially needed to keep close to Lunastra to prevent other males getting in, or vice versa, and then stuck around afterwards as she reared or deposited or did whatever the felines do with their young, to protect them from other monsters. Both of these long-term behaviours in close proximity, with repeat association and interaction with its mate, may eventually result in monogamy. Naturally low densities of elders may only emphasise this further, and even with mechanisms to find each other, a partner full stop is a valuable resource, even more so if the population is male-biased, which we could cautiously suggest for Teostra and Lunastra, given hunting quests and encounter rates. Whilst it could just be caution on behalf of Lunastra, it would fit that the population is male-biased in some other ways too, 1, it had fit with the theories presented here. 2, it seems that Teostra is the one trying to woo Lunastra over the other way around, even if both individuals are choosy. And Teostra's horns too. Whilst both sexes are horned and the chief use of the horns is controlling the flame aura, Teostra's horns still seem to be functional weapons, whereas Lunastra's are more of a tissue-covered crown that seems to be much more for display. If Teostra's ram-like horns are indeed used for ramming, or just combat with each other in general, then that would imply either greater or more severe conflict between males than females, that would be much more likely to stem from differences in numbers and likelihood of encounter than behaviour, given that Lunastra are pretty belligerent themselves in the breeding season too. It should be worth noting monogamy doesn't mean both sexes spend all their time together, and seeing either alone doesn't preclude it. Plenty migratory and seasonal breeding species will separate for months at a time during the year, and then find their long-term partners again on re-entering the breeding grounds. As well as protection and mates, the third and equally important cause for Teostra's mane that's also seen in Lunastra is a major store of its dander. Teostra stores the dander across its whole body, but it's chiefly stored in the fur-like integument that covers its form. And the newer graphics allow us to see that Teostra's wings are actually blanketed on top and bottom, with a fine integument too for dander storage as well. The usage of this dander offensively is perhaps the duo's best known attack, either fanning it from the body and then igniting it with a gnash of the tusks, or a sweep of the tail for Lunastra, or igniting it on the body in a move known as the supernova, or together in a hypernova. This fearsome move is rightly feared, and may be a more lethal explosion than others in the Monster Hunter world too. Both the fire lines create what is known as a dust explosion, essentially igniting floating particles they disperse in the air with their wings. Considering that these particles are explosive fuel themselves, this would also technically count as an air fuel or thermobaric weapon, where said fuel is dispersed with a small blast, a process Teostra and Lunastra substitute by using their wings, which then combines with ambient atmospheric oxygen for a very high power and high temperature explosion. This creates a mechanical wave of extreme overpressure, or the blast of an explosion, then a prolonged thermal wave of extreme heat, and then refraction, a massive pressure differential as it temporarily drops to below atmospheric pressure before restoring to normal. With more of the material being fuel, thermobaric weapons have more of the explosive material being fuel, and create longer and wider levels of overpressure and thermal heat. Unlike something like Brachydios' slime, which only presumably a small amount of the actual slime mold itself detonates as an extremely reactive fruiting body, or the small individual bomblets of basil juice, the fire lines have a uniquely devastating attack of which the connotations are they may be able to inflict devastating injuries beyond those of other volcano dwellers. The extent of the overpressure and pressure differential often causes incredible damage to soft and/or gas-filled structures like the lung, intestine and inner ear, especially the lungs, which can collapse, have ruptured alveoli or cause air embolisms. Even with the best Monster Hunter physicians, anyone who is lucky enough to survive an elder dust explosion is almost certainly sustaining a career-ending injury that they'll likely never properly recover from, either suffering breathing difficulties or balance issues from inner ear trauma for the rest of their lives. That's if they survive. This may also make them uniquely dangerous to other monsters too. Whilst many monsters would be able to shrug off the thermal wave and tank a fair bit of the mechanical overpressure, only a small handful of monsters would be able to survive not just the heat, but the refraction. The immense pressure differentials that mean few can likely withstand such blasts from the duo. This may be the differing factor that allows the pair to kill monsters that should be able to withstand such heat otherwise, though despite claims of aggression, it seems Teostra only rarely uses it on other monsters except for genuine threats, and is generally happy to live and let live within its territory right up until he isn't. The blasting equipment of the pair may well function as just that too, blasting equipment for construction. The area Teostra starts in world was one he built himself, carving a lava cave through his dander and strength until he'd fashioned it into a suitable home. As well as the general desire for a lair, it is suggested that this may be related to reproduction too, and could potentially even be a place to breed. This may also be why mane health could be an important signal for Lunastra too. If the dander is useful in nest construction, then amount of it and production of it will result in a higher quality nest. It may well just be one stage of several in wooing a mate. And Teostra is also seemingly something of a giant flaming bowerbird, keen to impress Lunastra with his constructed nest, with the guild hypothesizing that platform size and location relative to nearby mineral deposits are key factors for her in choosing a nest site. With this knowledge, it could be that past volcano maps in the old world, which seem to have open lava flows less like the linear, gravity-pushed lava flows following a volcanic eruption, and much more like lava moats, may have been built by Teostra too. These moats and their platforms could be old or out-of-use nests dug by Teostra, just currently out of use for one reason or another. It's unknown what values the nest has exactly though. Presumably it's not more comfortable than any other section of rock, although the lava moat may have some role in protecting either the young or the mating pair. Whilst the lava platform may initially seem unsuccessful, what with how many monsters can swim through it that live in volcanoes, it may be to keep away certain and regular annoyances. With its metal skin, Kushala Daora isn't very fond of the high ambient temperatures caused by lava, which presumably burn its soft tissues on the inside, and can apparently even melt its skin if it's not careful. Teostra's nest may be useful in keeping specifically Kushala away. This may seem like a lot for what, for the most part, is Teostra's peer, but whilst it's established the two don't like each other, Kushala Daora are also apparently common by elder standards, possibly being the most common elder with a resident population in the New World. It may be less a case of threat severity, and more a case of threat frequency, and the construction of the nest is Teostra curating its own Kushala-free space for reproduction. Hostility between the two presumably arises from competition, and in this case it may be over food, or perhaps more accurately feeding spots. The fire lions are both durophages, living off the minerals that surround them in much of their home, much like Kushala itself, and some volcanic wyverns like Gravios. The pronounced tusks could be useful here too, and be used like gouges to gnaw into mineral deposits and break off manageable chunks. So when not building or living in their love nest, the occupation of volcanic areas by Teostra and Lunastra seems to be at least partially for food and their love of warm temperatures. This thermophile behaviour is seemingly so strong that the two may occasionally be seen in deserts like the Wildspire Waste, although it's likely this is only something of a temporary location for them, with such areas having comparatively poor mineral loads. On rare occasions, both sexes can be seen outside of typically hot zones, and this may stem from feeding purposes too. Teostra can be seen in the 2nd Gen Swamp, a mineral-rich area that's adjacent to the volcanic belt. Whether this is young or old individuals kicked out by prime resident males, or Teostra of any age or health showing up for a certain type of mineral, is unknown though. Similarly, Lunastra will also appear in the tower, and as a great stone structure plated in Kushala Daora skin, it's possible this may serve as a feeding spot too. This can also bring them into direct conflict with people too, and Teostra will readily raid armories to eat their supply of gunpowder. It's worth noting that there is something of a clash regarding Teostra's behaviour at this point too. Though Teostra may attack towns, it only wants to eat minerals and has no interest in the people. It's often said to be aggressive by hunters, but other reports describe it as allowing animals it doesn't compete with to live freely in its presence. Lunastra is even described as fleeing from human observers in the old world, leading to a dearth of encounters and recorded information. It's pretty easy to label something as aggressive when you start a fight with it, or you see it tear a hole in a castle wall. But field observations where the fire lions are left alone may show that their reputation as pugnacious tyrants may not be entirely deserved, and there may be more to them than meets the eye. So generally I quite like Teostra and Lunastra. I think they're fairly solid elders that provide a fair amount of challenge, and essentially do most things a good monster should in the games. Good gear as well. And I've always really liked Lunastra's stylish yet understated gear especially. Though despite that, I probably like Teostra more so than Lunastra, as the latter started as Blue Teostra, and has partially broken away from that in Worldborn, but perhaps not necessarily for the best if you ask most people. Starting in 1st gen, I generally have more tolerance for more difficult or obnoxious fights, and generally dislike it more when a monster isn't challenging enough, but even I found her flames a little excessive at times too. But with that said, I think World Teostra is pretty good, and the best has been since 2nd gen. 4U's Teostra is a bit of a meme, and the constant blast spam was pretty obnoxious to deal with, and Rise Teostra has generally gone a bit more down this route as well. As cool as I think the Hypernova is too, and that Teo and Luna get a bond, I think the Supernova is just a reductive version of the pre-existing dust explosion, even if the lore is that it's supposedly just them igniting all of the dust on the body at once. I also think the 5th gen Fireline's effects can be a bit ugly too. 5th gen fire can sometimes be a bit weird when it's in a stream, and in 2nd gen I always like the dull orange of the particles, as it did make them look like shed dander, or dead skin as it's meant to be. The fact that dander now glows, and Teo and Luna are generally on fire in 5th gen, is often just a bit of a cluttered visual headache, especially when combined with the Scoutflies as well. But with that said, the explosions of any type did look absolutely phenomenal. On a similar note, I do think Teostra is as fair a candidate as any to return to Wilds. Him, Kushala, Kirin and Namael would be my elder picks. In the World book, it was mentioned they wanted elders that would allow them to show off the new graphics and features in the game, hence Kush and Teo being picked and all the excessive effects. If dynamic weather effects are present in Wilds, and they wanted a group of elders to show this off with storms, lightning, rain and bushfires, then the 4 I suggested would seem like good candidates to show off this new gimmick. Teostra and Lunastra seem based off the early Persian griffins from the Achaemenid Empire, such as this carving from the palace of Darius I in Iran, which was a winged horned lion rather than the fuller eagle-lion combo we more view griffins as today, and it's just one of a few Middle Eastern influences in DOS. Overall, Teo and Luna are essentially humanity's assorted depictions of lions condensed, as such being all about pride and nobility, and even the mains to the point of Lunastra having one too. In perhaps a more modern take, Teo is even portrayed as pretty lazy sometimes, often being asleep and nonplussed in some of his cutscenes. I wouldn't mind them continuing to lean into such things with the series progressing too. With Risen Teostra having a much paler mane, I think a variant or deviant of Teostra, with a darker or even black mane would be pretty cool. Not only for the lion parallel, but red and black make for a stylish combo as House Targaryen show us. Could even give it dragon element as well. I also think a mainless version that loses the blast but not the fire and becomes more physical could also be interesting, as I like the idea of some monster variations wounding them or taking away their chief ability over buffing it. And in turn that could be a nice reference to the Savo man-eaters, but that's enough fan ideas. Finally, I also really like the base theme for the pair, and don't find it too repetitive as some complain. I think Worlds actually gets a bit too busy, with too many overlapping elements, but Rises is actually pretty nice in that it almost feels like an in-universe hymn sung for Teostra himself. Overall, Elder videos are a little bit difficult to make, and tend to rely much more on speculation than trying to use canon as a foundation, but I still think the designs and lore of Teostra and Lunastra provided a good few things to talk about. Anyways, thanks for watching. And thanks to my patrons, the Super Stupa, Samburgo, K Sandom, Holden, Nickname 3110, Erengar Steiny, Flyguns Archives, Hui Hui, Dapper Raptor, Original Username, Evilly, Howleth, Archosaur Queen, Tommy Choi, Jacob Wilcox, Seth Fake Last Name, Zacer, Dodecablos, and Bazugazu Bakuhatsu Bakumatsu for their ongoing support to the channel. There's a link in the description for any interested in joining up. And at any level you can still cast your vote for which monster or topic will be picked for future videos, and I'm grateful for any amount. Thanks as ever too to Kamen Rider Moten for their digital artwork embellishing the video, as well as for close-up shots of monster anatomy. A link to their assorted social media is provided in the description for you to follow, for more pieces not used in the videos, and to request your own headcanons to be illustrated in a similar way. Thanks to I Am the Kaijuking for their Teostra skull. Luna was excluded due to overall similarities between the two, bar the chin and the horns and how big Luna's skull would be to fit on the screen. For more skulls, more original artwork and more anatomy, be sure to follow him on his Tumblr provided in the description. I'm glad many seemed to enjoy last week's video as we returned to Monster Hunter. Despite their comparative lack of popularity, they still beat out a lot of other monsters in the Patreon poll, and the video seemed to go pretty well. A few people also suggested for Orangutan that the fire element may be to open some pine cones to better get at the seeds. In some cases, pine trees have cones covered in resin that requires a fire to melt them to then allow the seeds within to disperse, in a phenomenon often known as fire serotony or pyriscence. Or some produce special cones activated in fire in conjunction with normal ones. So overall, it's a pretty good explanation for Orangutan's fire. Speaking of, hopefully you all enjoyed the fire lines too, and for next time,